Hello, Ashton. Thanks for the videos. That all looked really awesome. Let's jump into your current backbeat grooves. This is the 8th note backbeat grooves part 2. And that sounded a lot better than last week. Last week it sounded pretty good, but this week sounded really great. I think maybe playing to your metronome as 8th notes, you said 144. I think that probably helped a bit. Just being able to get more consistent with your right hand 8th notes, that sounded way more consistent. I'd say you're probably like 97% there with that. I still hear it moving around a little bit, but it's at a place that seems pretty comfortable and sounds pretty good, so that extra 3% of consistency, it'll just come over time, and we don't need to worry about it too much at this point. Just, be aware of that concept of consistency in your right hand with anything that we play. And, in time it just comes and we don't have to worry about it too much. So, awesome. Nice work there. The feel, the groove was great on all of that. The mix, the placement of things, all really great. So let's expand on this. First off, I want to see if we can bump our tempo up a little bit, and that may or may not be doable. Based on what we're going to do with this for this week. So if you got to stay at 70 or whatever, that's cool. If you got to go even slower, that's cool. But I'm going to put myself at 90 today. And 90, that's still pretty, medium to slow-ish tempo for these type of grooves. So, it should come fairly easily for you, if not this week, within the next couple weeks. So, again, we're looking at this page, 8th note backbeats part 2, and what we're going to do, you may have guessed already, is we're going to start combining those with our left foot options, like we did with the 16th note backbeat grooves before. So, I suppose for this week, we'll just start with the first one, which again was quarter notes in the left foot. And so now we got all 4 of our limbs going on. We're going to practice all of these beats while playing quarter notes in our left foot. And since you already did this with the 16th note backbeats, I'm assuming it shouldn't be too much of a challenge, but these are different bass drum patterns, and there's already a little bit of a coordination challenge between the right hand and the right foot. So now adding in the left foot, it could be a bit of a challenge, but you'll push through it and we'll be great. We'll be good to go. So why don't I demonstrate these for you? Again, I'm going to put myself at 90 on the click. And let's change up a couple other things while we're at it before I demonstrate that. So for the right hand, before we were going to the ride cymbal for this type of thing, which is super common, but let's explore a couple other sound options. A couple that I mentioned last week. So one would be the crash ride technique. Now, you could do this on a ride cymbal, or you could do it on a crash cymbal. Typically, I do it on a crash cymbal. And basically, I don't have a separate crash here on this setup, so I will just pretend that this is a crash cymbal. For you on your drum set, I think you have one over in this typical area here, right? And then you also have some over here on your right side that I saw that are kind of up high. So it's your choice. You got some different crashes to work with. Usually a bigger sized crash cymbal is a little bit better, like at least a 16-inch. if not an 18-inch or somewhere in there. I think looking at your cymbals, I think you have a 16 and maybe you have a 14 over here or something. I don't know. Maybe there's an 18. Doesn't matter that much. The position actually is probably more important. Looking at your drum kit setup, this would be the typical position for a crash if you're only going to have one crash typically. And we do put crashes over here, and that is an option. Yours look like they're kind of high, at least for my taste. If I was hanging out on those, riding on them, like we're going to do in these beats, for a long time, probably my arm would get sore because I'm having to lift it too much. So, for me, if it was my setup, I would probably lower those crashes quite a bit, and so I can ride on them without my arm getting tired and stuff like that. But I guess know that maybe the traditional place to start would be over here. So anyway, crash ride, you're basically using the shoulder of your stick on the edge of the cymbal. So here's the cymbal, here's the stick, like you're on the edge. So you're not using the tip on top and you're not like flat on top, but you're on the edge. Similar to like when we're on the hi-hat, right? Shoulder on the edge, that kind of thing. So my position may look a little weird because this is angled to be played more with the tip of the stick, like a ride cymbal. So when you watch me play it, I'm going to be kind of like down here with my arm, which, you know, whatever. It is what it is. But if I had a crash on this setup, I'd be up on the crash like that. And you want that washy, crashy sound. Crash ride technique. Okay. So we'll explore that. And then while we're at it, let's also practice riding on your floor tom. So just riding on the floor tom is exactly what it says. This will sound a little weird on mine because this is, you know, very high-pitched rototom. Usually the riding on the floor tom thing happens in like rock music. In fact, there's probably some examples of that on that Wallflowers record. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there probably is. Usually in like rock music, that's another thing that's very typical. It's kind of riding on the floor tom while you're playing some sort of beat. So, cool. Let me demonstrate these with left foot quarters. Again, I'll be using a toe heel technique for my quarters, most likely at this tempo. If it was faster, I would just be using the toe thing. You do what's comfortable for you at this point. That's totally cool. So, let me get this on at 90. How about I play 4 bars each of the first 3 using a crash ride technique. And then I'll play 4 bars each of yours, the 2 at the bottom of the page, using riding on the floor tom technique. And I'll see if I can make that transition without messing up. Okay. Again, with left foot quarters, crash ride. Oh, and I forgot to mention one other thing. For now, how about instead of spanking the snare drum, as we typically do in the middle, let's use a cross stick. So it would be this guy, right? Which I think we've talked about a little bit. Maybe we haven't. I do have a video about the cross stick on my YouTube channel. I'll try to remember to include that link that explains the basic technique here. But it's this kind of thing. The butt of the stick is resting on the head, usually about 2 inches away from the rim or so. And you're just clicking it with the rim on more of the shoulder part of the stick. Like that. I like to rest the palm of my hand on the drum basically all the time and just kind of lift up the stick using my thumb and first finger. And I usually like to spread my hand out too while I'm doing this. This gives me a really solid feel, and it gives me the best sound for my taste. Okay, so we'll do all of these with cross stick, 90, left foot quarters, crash riding. Okay, here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So, that's the way I did it just now, just for demonstration purposes. But obviously, when you practice these things, you'll want to spend longer periods of time on each one. If it were me, I would probably, set a timer like I like to do for, 5 minutes on each one. And maybe do the first half of that 5 minutes on crash ride, and somewhere in the middle I'd switch over and do like a riding on the floor tom thing, or vice versa. Just making sure that you're practicing both the crash ride thing and the riding on the floor tom thing, and spending enough time on each one so that it feels really good to you while you're playing it, because that's what it's all about. Cool. I think that does it for that. So, excellent. We're moving forward there. Let's look at the improvisation. So that was great. I'm curious, are you sort of coming up with these ideas before you play? Or are you just starting to play and allowing the idea to come out for the very first time? The video that I see, which one of those is it? Because it seems to me like when I watch you play these things, it seems kind of like you've worked something out and you've made decisions based on what you're going to play, and it's not the first time that you've played it, which is okay, but I think for now, I would prefer trying to flex you a little bit in the way of just sitting down and starting to play something without thinking about it at all, based on whatever rules we decide, and just allowing whatever comes out to come out. Because that is the true definition of improvisation, really. But, I could be wrong. Maybe that is what you're doing. And if that's the case, it's amazing, because what I'm seeing you play seems very sort of predetermined. It's almost like you know exactly what you're going to play before you play it. So if you can answer that question for me, I'd be curious to know. And if it was that you had already decided on playing something before you show it to me, for this week, try just playing something for the first time once that video camera starts rolling, and just allow what comes out to come out. And this could feel a little more uncomfortable, right? Because you don't know. And that's actually the beauty of improvisation. It's freedom of exploration, essentially. And that's, it's kind of why we're working on this, is so we get comfortable with being in that vulnerable position, that position of maybe being a little bit scared because we don't know what we're doing. And we just have to trust ourselves in that moment. That's the idea. So for this week, by the way, I love what you played. The Tom thing had a lot of energy to it. The idea was cool. So regardless of how you came up with it, I thought it was cool. For this week, let's add one more rule to this list because our list is growing, and I do want to spend a little more time on some of the things we've already put on here. So for this week, I added shape. Now, shape kind of refers to the overall shape of the improvisation. So if you can imagine, here's the start of our improvisation. A lot of drum solos, which are improvisations, might start kind of easy. It might be not so loud. It might be not so dense. The voicing might be simple. It starts easy and then it slowly builds. Builds and builds and builds and builds. Maybe it gets louder, it gets more dense, it uses more voices, and it gets to this peak or a climax, the top of the mountain, right? And maybe that's the end of the solo. Or maybe it starts to taper down again to the end of the solo. So that would be one example of shape. And I think that's probably the best way to think of it for these purposes. It's just the shape of the overall improvisation. You could potentially start at the peak of the mountain and slowly taper down, down, down until the end of the improvisation, which would be the bottom of the mountain for using the mountain reference here. This can also come up just in basic songs, right? Usually the first verse of the song is usually pretty mellow compared to like the chorus, which is way up here. And then maybe the second verse after the first chorus is mellower than the chorus for sure, but it's a little bit more involved than the first verse. So songs have their own shape to them as well. And so that's another example of shape. So let's choose tools. And while we're doing this, I'll demonstrate something. Again, for me, what I'm going to play, I have no idea. I just start hitting something, my ear picks up on it, and I just go with it. And if you can work in that manner for this week, I would love to see it, if you're not already. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to put a brush in my left hand for a tool and a stick in my right hand for a tool. Actually, why don't I go mallet. Mallet in my right hand, brush in my left hand. That's my tools choice. For time, I'm going to choose in time. For you, I would love to see you play something out of time because I haven't seen that yet. I don't know if you're scared of that or you're unsure. That is a very weird thing if you haven't done much of it. So maybe you can try to flex yourself a little bit this week and play an improvisation that has no time to it. It may seem weird, but and it doesn't come up very often in popular styles of music. It does come up in jazz music sometimes, and sort of more freer avant-garde styles of music. It comes up a lot. But regardless, I think it's always a good idea to practice things that are out of time because it just opens up a whole new world to playing this instrument and kind of using your brain in a different way. Because we do get very much stuck into playing things in time all the time. If you listen to much classical music, playing out of time is very common, especially a lot of solo piano stuff. Their time ebbs and flows and moves up and down constantly. So it's a good thing to be aware of. So But for me, I'm going to choose something in time for right now. Let me choose a voicing. I'll choose ride, floor tom, kick, and left foot. Ride, floor tom, kick, and left foot. And for shape, I'm going to choose starting at the top, the climax, and slowly tapering down to the end. Okay, see if I can remember all that. Here we go. Alright, there's one possible example. Cool, so pick your own and show me that next week. I can't wait to see it. Moving on to rudiments, right? Rudiments. Okay, yes, you got it. Nice work. That's great. So let's add the 9-stroke roll. So, 70, if you look at the 9-stroke roll, this one, it's a full 4 bars and then a repeat. So you're doing the entire 4 bars twice. So just notice that. It doesn't have that repeat in the middle of it like the other ones have. In a way, this is simpler, right? It's just 4 bars. Repeat 4 bars, and then we'll move on. So the 9-stroke roll, it's 9 strokes. At 70, again, they're 16th notes, even though it's written that old school way. 1E and a 2E and a 3. 1E and a 2E and a 3. Rest. So that squiggly line there, you probably know, at the end of the bar, is a quarter rest. So that's beat 4. So this one's got a big fat rest in it, which is kind of nice. 1E and a 2E and a 3, rest. 1E and a 2E and a 3, rest. 1E and a 2E and a 3, rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, rest. 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 Right. Left. With the feet. Okay, so I repeated it a bunch of times just so you can see it and hear it, and but know that that's only 8 bars of that, and then we would move on to the 10-stroke roll, which we can talk about next week. So that should be fairly simple. I think I would love to see the entire thing again at this point, if you don't mind. So from the very beginning of the first page all the way through the 9-stroke roll, it would be awesome to see everything, because I just want to make sure that you're still practicing all the ones that we've already gone over. Because eventually, once we go through everything, it becomes more of a reading sort of through composed thing, where you practice it by just starting at the beginning and playing all the way to the end. And, you know, you do that like every day for a year or whatever. And eventually with brushes and maybe mallets, and we speed up the tempo and all kinds of stuff like that. Cool. All right. So I think we're good for today. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.